Okay, so the two groups I was in kind of had quite different feelings about what collaboration would be. The first one, we kind of went for the general assumption that collaboration, everyone is equal, and that it's all quite nice, and that, as Gideon pointed out, we should work out contracts, so we all kind of understand where we should be and what our objectives are. Maybe even form a SME or CIC or other acronym, because acronyms are really good. Yeah, serious advice, form an acronym. It's very good for applying for things, apparently, if you've got an acronym. Yeah, it's brilliant. And then we have the sort of division between democracy, of everyone working together nicely, or what we discussed in this group in the second case was that actually a collaboration can feature hierarchy, and they usually do, which is kind of opposed to what we've been talking about a lot through this entire process. What else did we talk about? Let's have a look. I've got 7 pages of notes, so it's a bit complex. I won't read them all out, don't worry. Yeah, we talked about the notion that a collaboration can be curated, and that you might actually have an individual bringing people together to work together and leading, focusing them, and kind of prompting them at points to work along, which I think we kind of have a little bit of that in this program itself. We also talked about the fact that the modern Western world has this sort of paradigm that there shouldn't be leaders, and that artists are individuals, and that there's no hierarchy, there's no master and disciple, and actually we can play around with that quite a lot now, and that can be part of collaboration. A little bit of conversation about the fact that we have to compromise between people who have quite linear mindsets and tangential mindsets and accommodate both of those things together. And then in this group we talked particularly about the fact that virtual environments can help diminish prejudice, the fact that we can anonymize ourselves, can devolve those sort of assumptions we carry by profession or gender or race. And we talked particularly about your project Alto Games, which is an environment where people can collaborate online and come to solutions. And then we kind of, from that, we led on to the idea of heritage of professions and how they have a mixed connotation, which we kind of carry with us, and we should abandon these if we can, but they can be useful. They can give us a framework and a belief structure to work with.
Okay. Both our groups were mixed groups between technology people and artists. They identified first that when you have two projects that require the collaboration of artists with ICT people or other disciplines, then you have a multidisciplinary and multi-sector collaborations that, and the correct management of this collaboration is a crucial issue. Also, there is difference between the R&D, the research and development, and the final outcome of every project. So, from past collaboration, you take the experience basically to organize better your future collaborations and to negotiate better. There is a learning curve that the partners involved in a project like this should follow in order to learn the specific characteristics of the other discipline or the other sector or field. Collaboration requires good communication, trust, and as much as possible reduction of personal ego. Requires clear roles and responsibilities, as well as clear organizational structure. And collaborations, especially collaborations between artists and other sectors, have some unique characteristics, which is a collective creativity and actually an amplified sense of creativity. In the second group, the main points of discussion involved around methodologies about how to manage the collaboration. Many classic software project management, project management generally, methods were discussed like Cooper Stage Gate, Agile, Waterfall, Extreme. Some psychometrics like strengths finding tool that help you identify your personal strengths and then combine your strengths with other people in a team. Johari window, which is a team developing tool borrowed from change management. Again, clear roles and responsibilities is one of the main concerns regarding a successful collaboration. As well as it was identified the need of a matchmaking toolkit and the need to find a common knowledge between the people, the partners, the fields that you are collaborating with. The need to combine the different skills and specialities. Good time management and transparency. And regarding the IP, the intellectual property issues, what was the main point is that it needs a clear agreement, a clear contract, and clear boundaries from the beginning of the collaboration, in order basically to avoid these issues. Thank you.
So I think we probably covered a lot of the same ground in the conversations about communications and exchange. So considering, really taking consideration of people's feelings, of different capacities, abilities to engage with different working hours, and with just an underlying sense that we respect each other and are curious about each other. For me, the things that so far appear to be different to the things that have been said by the previous two people were around, there was some really interesting discussions around questions of IP and ownership, and just some unusual things came up. In the first was a fear of sometimes a fear of actually sharing ideas in case somebody else has already had the idea. So it's a kind of flip of what we're used to in terms of thinking about IP. And whole conversations around what an original idea is and how you might take an idea that has already been done and do it in a new way. A sense that creative people shouldn't worry about sharing ideas because there's already many, many more ideas than there is time to do anything with it. And really interesting thing came out from Black, who's in textile and fashion, this idea that copying actually is a way to generate trends, and that trend generation actually supports new fields and new ideas coming out. So it's just again this idea that the more people take and run with the same stuff, actually sometimes it can be really beneficial. Then in terms of people being acknowledged for their contribution, we understood that it's impossible, when you have a group that's working well together, it's actually really impossible to say who is contributing what percentage to what kind of good to the groups, what they produce. There was a really nice analogy. We talked about why collaboration is so pleasurable, and there was an analogy that came from Aya about a kind of musical analogy, like it being a musical ensemble playing, where you take it in turns and it's a kind of live negotiation, and there's actual pleasure in that kind of live negotiation of taking it in turns to lead and to follow, and that there's just pleasure in that. And also taking part in the idea that a group outcome is more important than individual glory. We kind of disagreed with each other all the way along, and there was just some very divergent ideas about whether competition was important and what role competition played. Jeff was talking, we were talking about time, and Jeff was talking about a book whose author I can't remember, but differentiating between different kinds of speeds of thinking for different kinds of processes. So sometimes you do your thinking fast and sometimes you do your thinking slow, and you need to pay attention to that when you're working with other people. We agreed within the group that time limits are brilliant and that time limits are really rubbish. Okay, so draw whatever conclusion you like from that. In the discussion about accommodation, transport, all of those kind of things, Jane pointed out that a really powerful thing to do would be to insist that everyone arrives by the same economy transport, so we don't have someone travelling business class while another one is hitchhiking. Funding issues. Arts Council, this was very funder specific. Arts Council emphasises outcomes and impact on users or audiences, and that there's very little support for the kind of free development and experimentation which is really needed. And that was from Natasha, and Jeff pointed out that any kind of funding, any process of trying to gain funding is always a gamble and a risk. You can really just give it a load of time and it doesn't work and it doesn't work and it doesn't work. And we all know that one, I think. That's it.
Okay, so I think we kind of went through a lot of the same things as well, but I'll try not to repeat too many. I mean, there was the communication issue came up a lot. This is the first group, obviously. We also talked a lot about how this sort of relationship or the collaboration can break down, and where time seemed to be, or speed of people's working seemed to be quite a common issue there. We talked a lot about funding and the difficulties people had with kind of filling out funding application forms, and that kind of led on to discussions about how possibly people within collaborations aren't necessarily the best people to be doing all these kind of extra jobs that are normally seen to be outside the kind of artistic process, like, for instance, doing application forms or networking or kind of, various other roles. And that became quite an interesting discussion about what are all these extra things that are a part of a collaboration as well. And there was also a really interesting point from Gaynor where she talked about how we involve ourselves in collaborations with things like Tumblr all the time, and don't realise the kind of legalities and implications of these kind of collaborations, how our work is used by these sites, which was a very interesting point. And with the second thing, the second group, again, a lot of the same things to begin with, but I think the most sort of interesting phase is we moved into thinking about the similarities between science and art, or the kind of, the sciences and art, and exploring that. I mean, we kind of didn't come to any absolutely solid conclusions about this, but it was such a rich area for our discussion, and actually led on to then thinking, was it possible for something to be not just a collaboration, but to actually be a kind of an art and a science at exactly the same time? And Neil proposed a very interesting idea about how music might, actually be mathematics and art at the same time, which we kind of explored and was very, very interesting. So thank you.
So I'm actually feeding back on the second group because already, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. the first group anyway. So, and I'll try, like Ruth, just to skip through some of the repeated points, but the second group that I was in here were very definitely, all of us, I think felt that clarity at the start of a process about that process and its methodology and the ownership, outcomes and the expectations of that were really, really important to actually get that sorted at the beginning to avoid ongoing confusions or conflicts later on. So also there was a couple of we talked a lot about personal input, so open-mindedness, which has come up a lot, actually from both sides, with people listening from both sides and learning from both sides. And that actually led into the knowledge that even before you go into a collaboration, you have to want to collaborate, but actually the drive and passion that needs to be in people who are interested, the drive and passion to be involved in interdisciplinary, to actually have that interest in, actually I really want to know about other skills and other areas, different skills, and share and stay open. So, and then we had quite a lot of talking about communication, and translation across disciplines, but also within these intercultural environments, and about how language issues for, say, technologists talking, say, to artists in this case, and artists talking to technologists, we mustn't make this such a big deal, because there was an example in our group from Maria, which is actually, she's working with educationalists, with special needs children, with technologists, and it was actually, suddenly she put forward an example which is far more complex, in the different language exchanges and learning that had to happen, and that we need to be willing to listen and learn from each other's languages. And that was discussed also in the basis of just actually working in English a lot in these European projects, which actually for first language English speakers is really working in Euro English, because we're not necessarily working with the speed of English and the articulated levels of English that we do just with each other. Yeah, so accepting that Euro English, or this European version of English, is used whatever, whether there's actually first language English speakers involved or not. Yeah, so its communication patterns are already crossing over and accepted on many levels. So, and we also talked about how science has had to really work hard to become more populist. So we talked about Brian Cox and people like that, who actually have learnt to speak in a much simpler way to reach a much, much wider group of people. So we must not get so hung up on artists mystifying through language and technologists not understanding how to speak. We've got to learn, we've got to listen, and that happens in every environment. So we felt it shouldn't be over-emphasised, we've got to get on with it. So another area we talked about was about broadening your network contacts. We had a long talk about actually going out of your comfort zone and shifting your hinterland. And actually, if you were really looking at working with different disciplines, you're exploring collaborators to look with, then move yourself and actually go and look up in events which actually will take you into a set of people you've never met before, or look for events where there's a very diverse range of people, which actually are the ones I enjoy the most, when you meet people you weren't expecting to meet. Don't put yourself back in again and again and again into the same environment. And actually Jane was saying she'd looked through her LinkedIn contacts last night and realised she loved them all and she knew them all, but actually those aren't the people she needs to work with now. She needs to look for new contacts there. So go outside your comfort zone. And then we also talked about this collaboration toolkit, which came up on the second page. And there was a feeling, we had a big talk about that, feeling that there's how to meet collaborators, that there's too much shallow networking and too much speed dating, and that this is just not the way. And however many institutions or however many quangos think that's the way you're going to meet collaborators, it's not. It's much deeper. As everyone said, the trust levels need to be developed. But actually also the same with the collaboration toolkit. If we try to fix a way to collaborate, that's not about evolution of what we know, and multiple different methodologies of collaboration. And it needs to stay open. And we did feel that there could be some guidelines and possibly, look at this is one way, this is another. But also, there is a heck of a lot of sites out there already with toolkits, with, there's so many creative industries and arts help sites, and so much of this. Actually, what might be more useful is a portal which actually said, look at all these sites, but not another one where we have to add our information, become a member, a network thing. So there's quite a good debate here about that, about no, not another, site, which is, because I think there's like 6 new creative industry sites this year. So where do you go and what do you do, and how the heck have any of us got time to keep on top of that? So something which more brought that together and helped us find our way through those multiple, not just in the UK, but worldwide opportunities that can come through that. So, okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, we talked about the biggest issue, which is communication. And we talked about the problems with use of the terminology, different languages. You have to take the leap of faith to collaborate also. Trust is a big issue, willingness to trust. Also, in a sense, you have to become the person you are working with, and to actually understand their values, adopt their frame of mind, the mindset. So there are a lot of issues in how we perceive others and how we perceive ourselves actually in a team, how to communicate tacit knowledge, how to articulate what we know in that sense, and also what we feel. Emotion is a very big part of this. So emotional communication, emotional intelligence as well, and empathy are really of equal importance. So being human and actually have a personal relationship, not just a professional relationship. So it's very important to actually play with other people, discuss their hobbies, their any personal preferences, and activities, social interaction over a meal, for example. That's something that is very important for people to do before they actually get into collaboration. So these are the skills that people don't think about, really. So we really need to think about these skills, these invisible, most of the time, skills. What else from this first discussion? Create space to experiment, equal engagement. We need to create awareness of what each person in the team is doing. Also, facilitation is important. To have a mentor in a project is important. Engagement by example in order to build trust. That's the final thing that we have here. And I think then it's the next session, which Ivana will also talk about.
Some key messages. First, we think that the facilitator should be there from the beginning of the project. So there should be a facilitator's role and should be a specific person. And this person should have in between business skills, artistic skills, and social skills. So he has to have the emotional intelligence that is needed to manage conflicts and intervene when things go wrong, but also to help them with the actual process. So to give them process and steps to kind of like see the project through. So he has to take responsibility both on the process, but also on kind of like smoothing conflicts and manage disagreements. So this was one thing. For the participants, it's important to learn to let go of your personal agendas and think that there might be agendas that will be new agendas that will be created through this kind of like collaboration, and what everybody's motives and incentive are, and why they want to be part of this project. Be more open and also be very curious about other people's positions and disagreements, but also the skills and the contributions that they bring in. So be as open as possible and be prepared to change things as they go on. Then we had something about, to include multidisciplinary collaboration training in curricula of the art school. Something that is very common in business schools, for example, MBAs. People are very used to work in terms of building case studies together, and they're very much encouraged in building networks, and even through during university years. So we need to have some kind of this kind of mentality at art schools, and bring in these projects already bring people from the arts and from the technologies. So it's not something that is strange to them. Also, we found out about this type of social media, that they're already, we see some segmentation already. For example, artists they prefer Facebook, professional, okay, not the artists are not professional, but but LinkedIn is more for technology people, or more business oriented, if you want, like from the business world, corporate people. And we need to have some kind of synergies and bridges, and to so also through between your personal creative space and other people's spaces. So also to how you can bridge your own space. It could be a platform or a website or whatever with these other social networks. So we need to bring things together there. And finally, regarding IPR, make sure that people have a common understanding of ownership and contributions at the beginning of the project, and be ready to negotiate ownership and credits. But this has to be done early on, before the project starts. We know that things will go, probably they might go more messy during the project, but at least we have an agreement to go back and see what we have agreed. So this is very important to have an agreement before we start of how the prior knowledge and also credits will be accredited. So I think, I don't know if people want to add something from my group.
Great.
Thank you.